Leaders, in many cases, in big organizations, they are data-driven. They want to see how psychological safety is connected to the big picture, the business goals. To be able to influence leaders on this, we need to be clear in our communication, highlight numbers, and show the benefit. Let me make this tangible. When we communicate with leaders about the importance of psychological safety, we can mention this data in a clear manner, highlighting the benefits. Based on a Gallup report, when employees feel that their opinions count, when they feel that their opinions count at work, which implies a workplace of psychological safety, you share your opinions and you notice that your opinions are valued, we can see 27% reduction in employee turnover, 40% reduction in safety accidents, and 12% increase in productivity.
Welcome to the Inner Game of Change, the podcast where we explore the unseen forces that shape how we lead, adapt, and thrive in the face of change and transformation. I am your host, Ali Juma. In this episode, I am joined by someone who has been on the front lines of organizational culture in some of the world's most recognizable companies. Mehmet Baha, author of the newly released book, Creating Psychological Safety at Work. Baha is the founder of Solution Folder and has over 24 years of experience working with top organizations, including being one of the first Facebook employees in Europe. He's a global trainer, a speaker on psychological safety, agile and resilience, and has delivered learning sessions worldwide. We unpack why psychological safety is not just a nice to have, but a non-negotiable for high-performing teams. From personal stories of toxic cultures to practical tools you can apply today, Baha shares what it takes to build environments where people feel safe to speak up, make mistakes, and bring their whole selves to work. If you're a leader, change practitioner, or simply someone trying to create better conversations at work, this one is for you. I am grateful to have Baha chatting with me today. Well, Baha, thank you so much for joining me in the Inner Game of Change podcast. I am grateful for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, Ali.
Thank you very much. Baha, today we want to talk about psychological safety. You recently released a book called Creating Psychological Safety at Work, the essential guide to boosting team performance. Let's start from the top. What's fascinating about this topic for you?
What is fascinating about this topic? It's a good question. Psychological safety is a key aspect of high-performing teams. And my own experiences working at Facebook and other companies made me realize the importance of this, because without psychological safety, we cannot achieve high-performing teams. Psychological safety means it's a work environment where employees feel safe to express their questions, concerns, ideas, and mistakes.
From your experience, Baha, what is an environment that lacks psychological safety? What does that look like?
An environment which has psychological safety, right?
Which does not have psychological safety.
Which does not. Okay. I can give you an example based on my experience. I once worked for one company. This was a tech company. And this tech company was one of the most successful companies in the world in its small area, its small niche. It was always number 2 in the world, never number 1. And in this company, we had one senior manager, basically the CEO of the company. And once I dared to ask a question to the CEO in a meeting, and his response was, "That's a stupid question." Mm-hmm. At that moment, I didn't know how to react. I felt powerless. And actually, after that moment, I felt fearful of asking him any questions. And it was the same with other employees as well. He could easily say to others, this is a stupid question. What is even worse, other employees started to imitate this. So you are in a meeting with other colleagues and they can say to you, it's a stupid question. It was a workplace, it was a toxic workplace. Employees didn't trust one another. They didn't share information with one another. And it was a typical case of a workplace with a low level of psychological safety. Again, as I mentioned, it was always number 2 in the world in its small niche. If it had psychological safety, I am sure it's likely that it could improve its success.
You talking about the leader of a company, does that mean that the leaders of a company, they are the key responsible people about creating the psychological safety?
Exactly. Leaders play a crucial role in creating psychological safety. The way they give space to others to ask questions, the way senior leaders communicate with others, openness, transparency, the way they deal with mistakes are critical. At the same time, it's the responsibility of all employees to foster psychological safety at work.
Yes, I thought so. I think it's almost like a team sport. Everybody's responsible about the environment they work in. I'm really keen to explore something that you've mentioned in your book and you just mentioned in your answer. Voicing concerns, that's not the end of the psychological safety. Is that how you respond to those concerns and how you manage expectations and creating a consistency. Have I got this right?
Exactly. So one of the aspects of psychological safety is to create a speak-up culture. Speak-up culture can be in 3 ways. So speaking up about misconduct, speaking up to challenge ways of working. It can be speaking up to offer new ideas. In addition to that, there are other topics as well, as you mentioned, sharing concerns. And as leaders, once we create an environment of psychological safety, encourage employees, colleagues to share concerns, it's step 1. We get the concerns. And the next step, as you pointed out well, is we got these concerns, we consider them, and ideally we take action on this. I can give you a specific example on that.
Sure.
Because during COVID, one telecom company in Spain, if I remember correctly, it was Telefonica. In the middle of COVID, Telefonica, in its own internal tool, they send a message to all the employees. Now we are going through a difficult time, lockdowns, and pandemic. And the question from the senior leadership was, what can we do? What are your concerns and what can we do, to keep working in this environment? Thousands of employees shared their answers, concerns, ideas. And then the senior leadership didn't disappear. They analyzed these answers, and based on these answers, they prioritized some of them, and they chose some of the concerns, and then they took action on that. And they communicated this to employees. And as you mentioned, consistency. We create space, employees share concerns, we consider them, evaluate them, choose the right ones, take action, and communicate to the employees. Otherwise, if you get the concerns of employees and disappear, not take any action, next time it's likely that employees will not share their concerns because they wouldn't trust us. So as you mentioned, it creates consistency, get ideas, evaluate them, take action, and communicate with the employees. This actually completes the circle and also contributes to psychological safety, so that next time they keep sharing because they see that, look, there is someone who listens to us and takes action on this.
To add to that, Baha, I always think that if you take the concerns and then you don't act on them, the lack of psychological safety will even amplify. Because how would I trust you when I voice my concern and then you have not really acted on them? And talking about trust, I really would like you to explore that trust factor. Is that a equivalent measure of the psychological safety?
Trust is one aspect of psychological safety. It's crucial, and it's not enough. Because in psychological safety, we deal with different issues as well, like dealing with mistakes, compassionate leadership, vulnerability. This is beyond trust, and trust is one aspect of it. It's a crucial element. And I'm sure you can remember from the book. The book includes 32 practical tools and approaches to foster psychological safety. And one of them is about trust. 5 ways to create trust. Competency is one of them. The more competent we are in our job, more likely that we can contribute to trust. Another element is consistency. Talking the walk, what we say and what we do, they need to be consistent. This also contributes to trust. Another point is honesty. We promise something and we try to deliver it. If we promise something and do not do it again, it can negatively affect trust in the team. Another aspect is openness. How open are we in regards to goals, clear goals, openness in feedback. Openness also creates, contributes to trust. And the last point is intentions, good intentions. To what extent do our employees perceive us as, leaders with good intentions? If they perceive us, as leaders, managers with good intentions, it also has a positive impact on the trust. So good intentions, the perception of it, competency, openness, honesty, and consistency. These are the 5 aspects that can help us improve trust in a team. And as I said, trust is just one part of creating psychological safety.
And this is why you link always, and this is the overarching theme of your book, that creating psychological safety has got a direct link to a high-performance team. Because what you're doing, you're removing all the barriers and you're unleashing the potential of these people. Have I got this?
Exactly. There are many studies on this, and it started in 2013, if I remember correctly, from Google's Project Aristotle. It's very famous. Google gathered different teams, data scientists, HR. The question was, what makes teams successful? Their starting argument was, let's take a look at the individual characteristics of team members. Their talent, the gender, their background, educational background, experience. Later, they realized that this starting point was wrong. You can have a really great group of employees, but it's not the main factor which determines the success of a team. And they realized that psychological safety is a key aspect of high-performing teams. Just to give you a visible example on that, let's say there are 2 teams. One team, you have superstars in the team, a lot of high-performing employees or stars. You can think of it in work or sports. Team 1, a lot of stars. Team 2, you have less number of stars. And in Team 2, employees or team members trust one another. They share information openly. They collaborate well with one another. Versus team number 1, a lot of stars, but they do not trust each other. They do not communicate well and collaborate well with each other. Team 2, with less number of stars, is more likely to be more successful than team 1. And the key aspect here is the working environment based on psychological safety that allows team members to communicate openly, collaborate well with each other, make mistakes, report them, learn from them, and improve. So psychological safety is a key aspect of high-performing teams.
Talk to me, Baha, about ways for leaders. So if I'm a new leader coming to an organization, how would I measure the psychological safety in the workplace?
Actually, Amy Atkinson, she's a leading academic on the topic of psychological safety. And she also shared her testimonial about my book. I met her in Vienna, a very nice person. She's a person who really embodies this concept in her own life as well. She created 7 questions. You can find those questions online, also in Amy's book, The Fearless Organization. And these 7 questions, I have them here. You can as organizations, ask these questions in a survey to employees and then get their replies so that you can at least have an idea about the level of psychological safety. There are basically 7 statements, and employees can rate these statements either as strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. I can read you a few of them. The first one is, if you make a mistake on this team, it is not held against you. You rate this from strongly disagree to agree. Another point, members of this team are able to bring up problems and tough issues.
Yeah.
Another one, the third one, it is not difficult to ask other members of this team for help. So basically using this survey and making it anonymous, you have an idea about the level of psychological safety in a team. To give you an example, recently I'm working with a global pharma company. And what we did was, before we started learning sessions, in the beginning, we did a survey, anonymous. We get the data. What are, as expected, the level of psychological safety was low. And we saw, based on these 7 statements, what are the areas of improvement. And then we designed a learning journey touching different levels of management and employees about psychological safety. And the plan is, after 8 months of learning journey, learning sessions, and participants put in practice what they learn, in the end of 8 months, again, we are going to do another survey to see the improvement in psychological safety. So in a nutshell, use this survey, 7 questions based on Amy Edmondson's work. Do this anonymously, and at least you have sort of pulse check to see the level of psychological safety.
I like that. I want to ask you a follow-up question, but once we get the information from the survey and then we got the insight, what would be some practical steps to put in place to improve, let's just say, the psychological safety?
Okay, good question. So it depends on the specific results of the test.
Yeah.
Oh, the survey, sorry. So let's assume that, based on the survey, employees do not feel safe to express their ideas at work, ideas and concerns. What can we as leaders do? One of the things that we can do is to encourage employees to speak up. I will share basically 3 ideas on this. One is, let's say we have team meetings, we are managers, and we ask the employees, what are your ideas on this? And everyone is silent.
Yes.
And one of the ways we can break this is an approach called green card. It's basically a green card that you bring to a meeting, and a person, an employee, a team member who has a green card in that meeting can play the devil's advocate. That person can express opposing views, can highlight potential risks in that project, can share ideas. And once that person does that, we as leaders and managers, we appreciate them and we thank them for doing this. Next meeting, another person, new person has a green card, does it again, opposing views, different ideas, pointing out risks. We applaud them, we encourage them. We need to do this consistently.
Yes.
Some weeks, some months, so that employees say, look, I share my idea and it doesn't have any negative consequence. So we can, create this environment where employees see that they can share ideas and they're encouraged to do so. Second point is, as leaders, sometimes we need to speak less. We need to speak less and listen more in such meetings. Yeah, we can allow others to lead meetings. Another point is we ask employees who thinks differently on the topic. It's an intentional question. We don't say, do you have a question? Yes or no. We say, who thinks differently? We give this space to others. Once they share their answers, we thank them. We encourage them to do it. Because without tapping into the ideas of employees, we can not, as an organization, go to the next stage. In a nutshell, green card, encourage them to speak up. Speak less and listen more than you speak. And third, be intentional in asking questions. Who thinks differently? It's about the mental shift here, the shift in mentality. And once we see that senior managers, do this in town halls, company meetings, and then it can also cascade downwards to mid-level and junior level managers as well. Through learning sessions, application, getting feedback from others, doing surveys, measuring this as well. So it's a process and it can be achieved. There are examples.
I like that question, but who thinks differently? Sounds like you're asking the audience. I've shared my thoughts and I would like to hear different thoughts from people. So basically you are actually inviting people to share their different views and hopefully some of them will start speaking. My observation is that psychological safety is a major part of a culture in the workplace. But there are always big changes and big events that happen in the workplace that usually undermine that, let's just say, psychological safety. For example, if there is a restructure in a business unit, we would safely assume that psychological safety will be threatened during that particular time. My take on psychological safety always, as a person in the business of managing change and helping organizations adopt a new change, is to anticipate where psychological safety will be threatened and then hopefully put some strategies in place, starting with the communication, basically bringing the threat level down and bringing down the temperature. In your view and from your observation, what happens when things like mergers and acquisitions, they usually threaten psychological safety?
Yeah, mergers, acquisitions, restructuring. I can even make it more difficult. Layoffs. This can have negative impact, might have negative impact on psychological safety. Let me share with you two examples. Let's take the example of laying off employees. On one side, Twitter, now called X. On the other side, Stripe. X, a few years ago, they laid off thousands of employees. How was it done? Automatic, you get emails, suddenly you are cut off from the system. You don't have any personal touch with your manager. From one day to another, you are out of the company. Fast, efficient, based on the CEO. Fast, efficient, and, it's quick. It damages psychological safety of employees who left the company, as well as the remaining ones.
Yes.
It's inhumane. Let's take another example, Stripe. It was after COVID. Stripe is a software company with two headquarters in Ireland and in the US. Stripe had to lay off a certain number of employees. The founders of Stripe did this in a humane way while trying to maintain psychological safety for both departing and also remaining employees. First, they wrote an email to all employees, transparency, what's going on. Secondly, in that email, you can find it online when you search Stripe, CEO, layoffs, you can find it on Google. They said they accepted responsibility. We apologize. We are sorry. We are responsible for this decision. It was about the strategy we created. Transparency, accepting responsibility, saying sorry. Third, they did this in a humane way. Departing employees had one-on-ones with their managers, face-to-face, if possible, if not online, talking with a real person. Departing employees, if I remember correctly, they were given their laptops. You can keep your laptops because you need to find a job. Although their stocks were not maturing, the company allowed them, you can get these stocks as well. The company gave the departing employees a special address, alumni, Stripe alumni email address, so that they can be in touch with the company. Even in a difficult situation, it can make you feel valued. I get alumni and part of this organization. Another point, they get months-long help from the company from Stripe to find a new job. And for the international employees who needed visa, the company provided extra service to them to help them in this transition. So two examples. X doing it automatically, cutting off employees from system, no human interaction. And now you see many employees are suing Twitter for doing this in such a way. Some of them were suing it for lack of inclusion. I think there were employees with disabilities and suddenly they got, laid off. And look at Stripe, the way it has done it. Stripe's approach, more human, based on compassionate leadership, much less damage on psychological safety. It's human. You talk with someone. Throughout the process, you get help. You are provided support on this. So even in these situations of mergers, restructuring, I understand it can negatively affect psychological safety. The key point is how we deal with these changes, humanely or inhumanely. Let's go with the first one. Do this in a compassionate way.
I like how you differentiate or you actually separate the departing and the remaining staff. I always think that if a staff member leaves a team, the equilibrium of the team will be impacted. If a new leader joins a team, an existing team, this change will impact the balance in the team because a leader comes with... A new leader is actually the biggest change that can happen to a team. And I can safely assume that psychological safety will be impacted if you've got a new leader because it's going to take time to really understand with the new leader. Similar way you're talking about X. So shift gear and ask you a question around change. I work in the business of change myself, and therefore I'm always interested in how those factors impact adoption of change in the workplace. How do you see the psychological safety impacting that?
Yes. So change and adoption of psychological safety in a change. It's a journey to create a psychologically safe workplace. And it's actually a change initiative. We can see it that way. And in many cases, teams or organizations, when they go through change, it's normal that they get resistance. And sometimes we focus on this resistance, and then it's not the most effective way. So to do this change, I can share with you two practical ideas that we implement with customers. The one is when I am with an organization or a team who would like to change. Normally, traditionally, consultants do it this way. Where do we stand now? What are the issues we have? And where do we want to go? And how can we go there? So they start with the present situation. Mm-hmm. So let's say, where are we now? The situation is, I don't feel safe. My manager doesn't listen to me. People start complaining, which is fine. And you start with a negative momentum. In our case, we start with what does an ideal team collaboration look like in our organization. So we start with the future.
Yeah.
And the next point is, okay, how does an ideal collaboration look like? People trust each other, people share ideas, people listen to one another, people go to lunch together. How does the ideal situation look like? The second question is, what's the current situation? What are some pain points we have? Now, employees start complaining. It's okay. We have this challenge. I'm overwhelmed at work. We don't get learning opportunities. We don't have the tools. We don't have the right processes. And then the next question is, okay, what can we do to create this ideal team collaboration? Now, the third question is to ignite the positive parts of the brain. So to start this change, it's crucial for us to create a positive momentum. And to do that, start with the ideal picture, go to pain points, and then create action items. Point number one. Point two, about resistors. We use a concept created by Jason Little from Canada. This concept is based on movers, movables, and immovables. Movers are employees in an organization who are willing to start this change. They say, great, now we can focus on improving psychological safety. It's an important area for us. I believe in the topic, and I am committed to making this happen. Movers. Movables are employees who are neutral. They say, again, we have a new leader, Ali Juma. Let's see what he's going to do now. He came up with this idea of psychological safety. I'm not sure if it will work, but let's wait and see. So they're neutrals, they sit on the fence and they wait. The third group of employees are immovables. they basically resist to this change and they say, it was better, in the past, or, the status quo is better, no need for change. They're not interested in this. They don't show any commitment at all. To drive the change successfully, we need to start with movers, employees willing, interested in the topic, committed to this one. We start with them, we involve them in the trainings, they learn these approaches, how to create psychological safety. And then the next step is to create small wins with these employees. Small wins, improvements in the team environment, improvements in number of ideas generated, improvements in new products created. We get these small improvements. We present these small improvements to movables, neutrals. And the idea is to gain movables, neutrals, to the movement. And throughout time, ideally, we can also gain some immovables, and some immovables can stay there as well. The main focus is on movers. We work with them, create positive momentum. We create small wins, present to them, gain movables as well, and expand this movement. So start with the big idea, positive, desired idea, understand pain points, create action items, implement, approach one, approach two, movers, immovables, movers, movables, and immovables.
And Jason Little has been my guest a couple of times in my podcast. And actually, just recently, I've got had a guest called Dr. David Weiss. He calls the neutrals bystanders. And bystanders, basically, they're just waiting and seeing. And so the focus, similar to what you're saying, you focus on the early adopters or the excited people, plus the bystanders. But I think you mentioned something really important. We often focus in the business of change management around managing resistance. And I think you just made me think about it might be far more valuable for us to focus on creating that psychological safety in the first place. And create the environment and continue creating the environment. And obviously do all the right things to get, the people supported through the learning and the training and the support after that and the communication. And this is not a smart play on the words. This is what you're teaching me here is that it's a far lasting impact if you focus on the psychological safety during the implementation of change. Have I got this close to right?
Yeah, that's true. And you raise an important point about the resistance and its connection to psychological safety. Going back to movers, movables and immovables. In the case of immovables, showing resistance, we need to listen to them and understand them. Yeah, we need to give them space to express their concerns as well. Keeping in mind that the focus is on movers, creating momentum, getting small wins, expanding this, and gaining movables, and then hopefully later immovables.
I want to ask you a question around, we often make the assumption that the leaders doing all of this work, they're fully equipped and knowledgeable around understanding psychological safety and all of those things. But sometimes that's not really what happens in the work. What would be some of the strategies that we can implement in the workplace to ensure that the leaders have a deep understanding how important this piece is?
Leaders, in many cases, in big organizations, they're data-driven. They want to see how psychological safety is connected to the big picture, the business goals. To be able to influence leaders on this, we need to be clear in our communication, highlight numbers, and show the benefit. Let me make this tangible. When we communicate with leaders about the importance of psychological safety, we can mention this data in a clear manner, highlighting the benefits. Based on a Gallup report, when employees feel that their opinions count, when they feel that their opinions count at work, which implies a workplace of psychological safety, you share your opinions and you notice that your opinions are valued, we can see 27% reduction in employee turnover, 27% reduction, 40% reduction in safety accidents,
Wow.
and 12% increase in productivity. Let's convert that into numbers. Depending on how many employees you have, at least you can get an idea about the millions of dollars of savings you can get once you create a workplace of psychological safety.
Excellent. What else you a sort of a question that has always been in my mind. From your observation, do you notice, are there certain industries out there that have sort of sustainable psychological safety and some industries do not? So, for example, is there a difference when it comes to psychological safety between a construction company with global reach to a university setting?
It's an interesting question. I don't have any data on this to tell you. Look, there was a study done and it shows that certain industries are more likely to create psychological safety. I don't have data on this. What I can tell you is that it's based on my experience and based on what I'm, researching on the topic. It doesn't have, as far as I see, it doesn't have any industry-specific, distinction here.
Yeah.
You can find organizations, whether small or big, or a government or private, which can have relatively high levels of psychological safety. I can give you one example from Germany. There is one engineering company, engineering and architecture. And this engineering and architecture company, they created one concept called mistake breakfast. I met with the head of HR some years ago, and it was in a conference. And she told us that one day she had an idea. She talked with the senior management, and then the idea was to organize a mistake breakfast once a quarter. An employee with the biggest mistake and the biggest learning makes a presentation while other employees have breakfast. All the employees attend this session. And when she presented this idea to the senior management, first they were a bit concerned. They say, what if employees perceive this differently? And what if they think, we encourage them to make mistakes? What if this goes out of control? They were a bit fearful of this. They went think through it, and eventually they said, okay, let's give this a try. And then, if it works, it's good. If it doesn't work, we can stop it anyways. So they tried this mistake breakfast once a quarter. An employee with the biggest mistake and the biggest learning goes there, makes a presentation. To their surprise, this event resonated very well with the employees. They kept doing this, and after doing it some time, the organization noticed that the trust among team members improved. In the end, the total number of mistakes done in this engineering and architecture company, the total number of mistakes fell down as well. And in Germany, they got the best practice award from the German HR Association. So you can find really different examples from universities to, different sectors. I can give you one more example from Canada, McGill University. This university in 2009, if I remember correctly, they published a report called Failure Report. In this failure report, they basically talk about their failures and their learnings out of it. In the beginning of 2000, the university had a vision about sustainability. And to implement this vision on sustainability around 15, 20 years ago, they engaged with external consultants. How to do the communication of this with students, with staff, with academics, with the partners, with the society. And as they collaborated with external consultants, later they realized that the university made some mistakes. One of the mistakes was not setting the expectations clearly in the beginning with the external consultants. So this was one of the learnings. And in the failure report, you can see one section, one page about this learning. McGill University takes this to another level, because in psychological safety, we talk about making mistakes, reporting them, learning from them, and not repeating the same mistakes. In the case of McGill University, they not only share the mistakes and learnings internally, but they also do it externally. They do this externally so that other universities competitors, stakeholders, partners, society can learn from this and not make the same mistakes. So irrespective of the industry, we can find really good examples of organizations which place big value of learning from mistakes, sharing that with others, and creating a space for employees to share their ideas.
I really like that. In my head, I'm thinking if I share the mistakes, imagine I'm running a presentation on mistakes. Mm-hmm. This is me as a leader modeling vulnerability in the workplace. And I'm hoping that by modeling this behavior, that the staff will be able to adopt a similar attitude, provided that the whole objective is so we can learn from the mistakes. So that can be another, and obviously there's another strategy to encourage openness in the workplace. Because mistakes happen every single day. And whilst we are not interested in the mistakes, we're interested in the progress and the learning going forward. I am aware of time and I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation, Baha. You've given me a lot of things to think about. A question that I usually ask my guests, I am in the business of change and communication. What would be your piece of advice to people like myself and my network when we manage and facilitate change and help our stakeholders adopt change? What would be your counsel and piece of advice for us to consider when it comes to psychological safety?
Yeah, let me think through this. My advice on change, on psychological safety. Start with senior leaders, touch different levels of management, and focus on creating a positive momentum with movers.
Excellent. That is great advice. The movers are the catalyst for the flywheel to start moving, and then hopefully the movement will be a positive momentum. Baha, it's been a pleasure having you in my podcast, The Inner Game of Change. How would people connect with you?
First of all, it was my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I really enjoyed your questions, and I'm glad, I feel grateful that you took the time to read my book. It means a lot to me. For the listeners, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. When you write Mehmet Baha, you can see me there. And if you have any specific questions, you can also send me an email, Baha, BAHA at solutionfoldertogether.com.
And we're going to put all your information in the podcast details, Baha. Your book is available now on Amazon?
Correct. It's available on Amazon worldwide. It was published last week, so September 10th. And the book is based on 16, 32, and 64. 16 inspiring examples from all around the world.
Yes.
32 practical tools and approaches to foster psychological safety. And 64 thought-provoking questions to help you create your psychological safety action plans.
And I love those questions. And actually, I've already used a couple of them yesterday, and they all motivate you to think differently now around the idea of change anyway, especially in my place. I am grateful to have chatted with you today, but I hope I can get you back at some stage next year and we tackle another aspect of psychological safety. But until then, stay well and stay safe.
Likewise, Ali. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode valuable, remember to subscribe to stay updated on upcoming episodes. Your support is truly appreciated. And by sharing this podcast with your colleagues, friends, and fellow change practitioners, it can help me reach even more individuals and professionals who can benefit from these discussions. Remember, and in my opinion, change is an enduring force, and you will only have a measure of certainty and control when you embrace it. Until next time, thank you for being part of the Inner Game of Change community. I am Ali Jama, and this is the Inner Game of Change podcast.